My wife mocked my small paycheck in front of her friends after I worked 80 hours a week, so I left silently and let her taste real emptiness. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I've always believed that hard work and loyalty could build a happy marriage. I didn't grow up with much, just a small-town life where every dollar mattered and every promise meant something. My dad worked long shifts at the factory, and my mom stitched clothes at home. They didn't have luxury, but they had each other. That's what I wanted, a love built on effort, not extravagance. When I met Claire, she was everything I'd ever hoped for. Sharp, beautiful, confident. She said she admired how grounded I was, how I didn't need to pretend. We got married after 2 years of dating, and those first months felt like magic. I'd come home from work exhausted, hands covered in grease, and she'd kiss my forehead and say, "You're the hardest working man I know." I believed her. I started working 80-hour weeks as a technician, double shifts, weekend calls, whatever it took. My paycheck wasn't huge, but it kept the lights on, paid rent, and allowed Claire to focus on her creative business. She wanted to start a home decor brand, and I was proud of her ambition. I told her, "Don't worry about the money for now. I'll handle it until things take off." At first, she appreciated it. She'd make me coffee when I came home late, or surprise me with takeout. But slowly, things changed. She started talking more about her circle. Friends who had husbands in finance or tech. Sometimes, when they'd visit, she'd joke lightly. "My husband's always working, but I still can't get him to bring home a Tesla." They'd laugh. I laughed too, pretending it didn't sting. I told myself she didn't mean it. But deep down, something small cracked that night. Something I didn't know would grow into a fracture that changed everything at first. I thought the jokes were harmless, just Claire being playful. But over time, those playful remarks turned into patterns I couldn't ignore. She started caring less about how hard I worked and more about how I looked doing it. Suddenly, everything was about appearances. She'd say things like, "Maybe you should wear nicer shirts to work. You look too blue-collar." It stung because that blue-collar grind was what kept our lives running. Her social circle changed too. She began spending more time with her friends from a local art group. Women who wore designer clothes and posted champagne brunches on Instagram. When I'd get home after a 14-hour day, she'd be scrolling through their feeds, sighing. They just seemed so accomplished. I'd remind her, "You're building your own business too," but she just shrugged, muttering, "It's not the same." I started feeling like an outsider in my own home. I'd walk in, and she'd lower her phone screen, forcing a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dinners turned quiet. Conversations faded into one-sided check-ins. "How was your day?" "Fine, you." "Busy?" One night, she mentioned a dinner her friends were hosting, a big gathering full of creative entrepreneurs and professionals. She looked at me, almost hesitating. "You should come. Maybe it'll inspire you?" I laughed softly, thinking she was joking. But she wasn't. She wanted me there, not as her partner, but as her project. I told myself it was just pressure talking, that she was stressed about her own success. But something about the way she looked at me that night, half pity, half disappointment, made my stomach twist. That dinner was supposed to be an opportunity to bond. Instead, it became the night that quietly tore our marriage apart. That dinner still plays in my head like a movie I can't turn off. Claire spent the entire afternoon getting ready, curling her hair, laying out jewelry, changing outfits 3 times. She barely spoke to me, except to ask if I could please iron my shirt properly this time. I didn't argue. I just wanted her to be happy. When we arrived, her friends were already there, a group of well-dressed couples laughing, round a long table in an upscale restaurant that smelled like truffle oil and expensive wine. I instantly felt out of place in my $40 dress shirt, but I tried to shake it off. I smiled, introduced myself, and listened to their stories about vacations, startups, and bonuses that were bigger than my yearly salary. At one point, one of the guys asked what I did for work. Before I could answer, Claire chimed in with a laugh. "Oh, he works all week fixing things. 80 hours sometimes, but somehow the paycheck still looks part-time." Her friends burst out laughing. Even the waiter smirked. I felt the blood rush to my face. I looked at her, waiting for her to realize what she'd just said. But she didn't. She kept laughing, sipping her wine like it was nothing. Someone joked, "At least he's dedicated." And Claire added, "Yeah, dedication doesn't pay the bills, though." Something inside me cracked right then, not loudly, but quietly, deep enough to change everything. I smiled weakly and played along, pretending I wasn't dying inside. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of noise and polite humiliation. When we got home, she acted as if nothing had happened. She kicked off her heels and said, "See? That wasn't so bad." I didn't reply. I just sat there in silence, still hearing her laughter echo in my head. That night, for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like her husband. I felt like her punchline. The next morning, Claire woke up humming, as if the night before had been some lighthearted success. She leaned against the doorway and said, "See? You survived," before heading to make coffee. I just stared at her, the same woman I once came home to with pride, now a stranger who'd laughed at me like I was beneath her. I wanted to yell, to ask her why she did it, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I went to work like always. The drive felt longer that day, every red light giving me time to replay her voice. The smirks, the way she looked so proud of herself. I'd spent years believing that love was measured by sacrifice, but maybe for her it was measured by status. That week I barely spoke. Claire noticed, of course. "You're being dramatic," she said one night when I came home late. "It was just a joke." I looked at her and quietly replied, "You laughed at me, Claire. Not with me." She rolled her eyes and went back to her phone. I realized then confrontation wouldn't fix this. She didn't see what she'd done as wrong. To her, embarrassment was normal if it came with social approval. So I stopped arguing. I just listened and observed. Days turned into weeks, and I became quieter, colder, almost invisible. I started sleeping on the couch when my shifts ran late, pretending not to wake her. I noticed the way she'd smile wider at her phone than she did at me. The house began to feel less like home and more like a stage. One where I played the part of a husband she no longer respected. And yet, beneath all that silence, something was changing inside me, something deliberate, patient, and irreversible. The silence between us became its own kind of language, cold, polite, and empty. I'd leave for work before sunrise, come home after midnight, and she'd barely look up from her phone. She started sleeping in a different room for better rest, and I didn't argue. What was the point? Every word between us felt like walking barefoot on broken glass. Still, I kept doing what I'd always done, working. My manager offered extra shifts, and I took them without hesitation. The money wasn't amazing, but it helped me save quietly. I stopped sharing my pay details, stopped talking about our finances altogether. I just handled things while Claire spent freely new clothes. Weekend brunches, beauty treatments, all for her brand. She'd come home late, smelling of wine and perfume, laughing about how inspiring her creative circle was. Once, I asked softly, "Do you ever miss us?" She barely glanced up. "You're always too tired to have an us." That line hit me harder than she knew, but exhaustion wasn't what killed our marriage, indifference did. And hers was colder than anything I'd ever felt. I started packing my emotions away piece by piece. I stopped telling her about my day, stopped asking about hers. She called me boring, said I'd lost my spark. When I didn't react, she scoffed. "You can't just shut down every time life gets tough." But she was wrong. I wasn't shutting down. I was waking up. I began keeping copies of important documents, quietly moving small amounts of money to a separate account. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I just needed to protect what little I had left, my sanity, each night. I'd lie awake listening to her laugh in the other room, wondering when exactly she'd stop seeing me as a man and started seeing me as a burden. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when she usually disappeared for networking brunches. I was cleaning the living room, gathering receipts and papers from the coffee table when I noticed her tablet buzzing. Normally I never touched her things, but my name flashed across the screen in a group chat preview. "He's so dull now." I swear I could do better. My stomach tightened. I shouldn't have, but I opened it. The chat was with 3 of her friends, the same women from that humiliating dinner. The thread was full of messages about their relationships, mostly harmless gossip. Until I saw more of hers. Asterisk, at least he pays bills. Mine doesn't work 80 hours just to stay broke. He's like a roommate who thinks love is enough. I'm honestly embarrassed for him. My hands started shaking. I read those lines over and over, each one carving into me like a blade. She wasn't just mocking me in front of strangers, she was ridiculing me behind my back too. I sat down on the couch and stared at the wall. I'd spent years breaking my body to give her stability, only to become the punchline in her life. For a long time, I blamed myself for the distance between us. Maybe I wasn't romantic enough. Maybe I worked too much. But this was different. It wasn't about effort. It was about respect, something she'd stopped giving me a long time ago. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw the tablet or scream. Instead, I smiled. For the first time in months, I felt something powerful, clarity. She was already gone. Whatever love we had died long before I noticed. That night, I started making a plan not to hurt her, not to beg her back, but to leave without a trace. After that day, something inside me went completely still. Not angry, not sad, just empty in a way that felt peaceful. I started acting like everything was fine, smiling when she spoke, asking about her day, even helping her carry groceries. It was easier that way. If she noticed the shift, she mistook it for me trying again. But really, I was rehearsing my silence. At work, I volunteered for an out-of-town project. It paid slightly better and came with a potential transfer opportunity. While she thought I was simply overcompensating, I was quietly preparing for freedom. I started moving small belongings, old photos, my dad's watch, personal documents, into my car trunk. I withdrew a portion of our joint savings, enough to start over, but not enough for her to notice right away. At home, Claire was busy curating her image. She'd post pictures online with captions like "building the dream with my hardworking man." While barely acknowledging me in person, I'd scroll through her posts, reading the comments from friends calling us goals, and feel a bitter kind of amusement. We weren't a dream, we were an illusion. She needed to keep up appearances. Sometimes, she'd come sit beside me, pretending to care. "We should go on a trip soon," she'd say, voice soft, eyes somewhere else. I'd nod. Yeah, maybe after this project. But in my head, the trip I was planning didn't include her. When I looked at her now, I didn't see the woman I married. I saw someone who traded love for validation, who mocked the very man keeping her comfortable. And yet, she had no idea she was living on borrowed time. The transfer approval email arrived 3 weeks later. That was when I knew. The countdown had begun, the night before everything changed. Claire decided to host another dinner party. Bigger, louder, full of the same people who'd laughed at me months ago. She said it was to celebrate her growing business, though I knew it was really about appearances. I didn't argue. I just helped set the table, opened the wine, kept my expression neutral. The guests arrived one by one, polished, confident, the same smug smiles. I shook hands, exchanged small talk, and tried to disappear into the background. Claire floated around like a queen, laughing too loudly, complimenting everyone except me. I'd never felt so invisible standing right beside my own wife then. Halfway through dinner, one of her friends asked casually, "So how's work been treating you? Still pulling those endless shifts?" Before I could answer, Claire leaned forward with a smirk. "Oh, he's still at it, working himself to death for pocket change." The table erupted in laughter. My fork froze midair. Even now, after everything, she still found pleasure in degrading me. This time, though I didn't feel shame, only clarity. I looked around the table, memorizing every face, every laugh. Then I looked at her and something inside me just disconnected. When the dinner ended, she was still buzzing from the attention. "See," she said, pouring herself another glass of wine, "you're finally fitting in." I stared at her, this woman I'd once thought I'd grow old with, and realized there was nothing left to save. She didn't even notice the resignation in my eyes as I said, Yeah, I guess I am. That night, while she slept off her champagne, I packed a bag and sat in the dark for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just waited for dawn because I knew it would be the last sunrise she'd ever wake up to with me in her life. The morning light crept through the blinds as I zipped up my last duffel bag. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I stood there for a long time, taking it all in, the life I'd built, the love I'd wasted, the years I'd never get back. Claire was still asleep in the bedroom, curled up under expensive sheets that my overtime hours had paid for. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside a note that said nothing but, "I'm done." No anger. No explanations. Just the truth. Before walking out, I did one last thing. Transferred enough money to cover next month's rent and cleared the last of her credit card debt. Not for her sake, but for my peace. I didn't want any ties, any lingering guilt. When the elevator doors closed behind me, I felt weightless. For the first time in years, I could breathe, but freedom didn't feel like victory. It felt like heartbreak disguised as silence. The drive to my new city was a blur. Hours of empty highways, coffee cups, and quiet tears. I'd taken a transfer at a repair facility 2 states away. Small apartment, lower pay, fewer memories. The loneliness hit me harder than I expected. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, scrolling through social media out of habit, only to see her posts smiling at parties, pretending nothing had changed. For a moment, I wondered if I'd overreacted. If maybe I should have fought harder, demanded closure. But then I remembered the laughter, the mockery, the humiliation, and that guilt melted away. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the ghost of the man she thought she could break and walk away from. And as the weeks went by, that ghost started learning how to live again, quietly, deliberately. Without her shadow lingering in every thought, 3 months passed before I heard her name again. One of our mutual friends, Daniel, called out of the blue. "Man, Claire's been asking about you," he said cautiously. "She's not doing great." I didn't reply at first, I just listened. Apparently, her business had collapsed after her supplier pulled out, and most of her so-called friends had stopped returning her calls once the money dried up. The glamorous life she'd flaunted online had dissolved into silence. A strange calm settled over me as I listened. Not satisfaction. Exactly. Just a quiet confirmation that life has its own way of balancing the scales. A week later, she texted me. "Can we talk?" 3 words that used to mean everything now felt hollow. I stared at the message for a long time before setting my phone down. I didn't respond. I'd built a new routine, early morning runs. Simple meals, long evenings, fixing old radios in my tiny apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Every day felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten. The air smelled different, freer, cleaner. I started sleeping without nightmares. Still, part of me couldn't help imagining her life now. I pictured her alone in that big apartment, staring at the same walls I once dreamed of decorating with her. The emptiness she'd mocked me for living in, the boring. Stability had become her reality. Daniel called again a month later. "She moved back in with her parents," he said. "I think she's realizing what she lost." I thanked him for telling me, but inside I felt nothing but peace. No anger, no joy. Just a quiet understanding that some endings don't need revenge. Sometimes the world gives it to you without asking. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't miss her at all. Almost a year passed before I heard from Claire again. Her name popped up one evening while I was making dinner, a video call request. For a moment, my chest tightened. Old reflexes die hard. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her face appeared on screen, thinner, tired, makeup barely hiding the stress etched into her eyes. The confident, mocking tone I remembered was gone. "Hey," she said softly. "You look different." I didn't respond. I just waited. She sighed. "I know you probably hate me." "You should. I was awful to you." I thought I was chasing something better, but I just ended up losing everything. Her voice cracked halfway through, and for a brief second I saw the woman I once loved stripped of pride, raw and human. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she continued. You didn't deserve what I did. I thought success would make me happy, but it only made me feel smaller. My friends disappeared the moment my money did. You were the only one who ever stayed, and I threw that away. I let the silence hang for a long time. Finally, I said, "You didn't just throw me away, Claire. You laughed while doing it." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her face. I know. Her apology wasn't manipulative. It was real, maybe for the first time in her life. But I'd already moved past the part of me that needed to forgive her. "I hope you find peace," I said quietly. Her lip trembled. "Does that mean you forgive me?" I shook my head gently. "It means I'm done carrying it." She cried harder then, whispering, "I wish I'd loved you better." I ended the call without another word, not out of cruelty, but because for the first time, I truly meant it when I said goodbye. After I ended the call, I sat in silence for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of traffic outside, and my own heartbeat filling the room. I expected to feel something heavy, guilt, sadness, anger, but there was nothing. Just stillness. For the first time in years, my life finally belonged to me. Claire never called again. Maybe she realized there was nothing left to say. Maybe she finally understood that apologies don't rebuild what mockery destroyed. A few months later, Daniel told me she'd taken a job at a local boutique, renting a small room near her parents' house. She was surviving, but not living. And somehow, that felt like enough justice for me, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because life had shown her the emptiness she once mocked me for. My own life grew quieter, simpler, and better. I started fixing old motorcycles as a hobby, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never had time for. My apartment, though small, felt like peace. The walls weren't filled with laughter or noise, but they held honesty, and that was enough. Sometimes people ask if I'd ever take her back if she changed. I just smile and say, some things can't be repaired once they've been laughed at. Because the truth is, love doesn't die in a single moment. It fades in the sound of someone you trust mocking your worth. I didn't destroy her life. I didn't expose her to her friends or seek revenge. I simply walked away and let the silence do the talking. And in that silence, she finally met the emptiness she'd given me all those years. Now, when I look back, I don't see heartbreak anymore. I see freedom. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the loudest, most powerful revenge you can ever take.